Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I'm attorney Gerald Griggs, the 13th president of the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization in the nation, and more particularly in the state of Georgia. And my why is I was a young man who grew up in South Dekalb County. My parents owned a florist on Glenwood for most of my formative years, from birth to about 12 years old. And so DeKalb is near and dear to my heart. But more importantly, Georgia is near and dear to my heart, and I want a future for the future residents of Georgia with clean air, clean energy, making sure that we have a sustainable state and ultimately a sustainable planet.
Absolutely. So to go further on into that, Attorney Griggs, most people when they think about the NAACP, they think about, civil rights, right to protest. How important that we make that connection, and what is the NAACP's involvement in protesting for environmental rights and environmental justice, and what are some of the things that you all are doing in Georgia and in DeKalb?
So what people need to understand is there's a nexus between civil rights and environmental rights, because you can't truly be free if your climate and your environment is polluted. And so many times when we're dealing with violations of people's human rights or civil rights, there's a component to the environment that they're living in where there's exceptional waste that is there, there's exceptional lack of intentionality by elected officials to improve those conditions, which give rise to unnecessary contact with law enforcement, poverty, and things that give drivers to inequity. And so at the NAACP, under the leadership of our national president, Derek Johnson, and the chairman, we have instituted on all of the units a requirement to have an environmental justice committee that is assigned at the branch level, because anybody knows anything about the NAACP, the work is done in the unit and it's done at the branch level. So across the state, we currently have 134 units. There are 100 of them that are active. We have a committee there to address these issues. So in like DeKalb County, we want to address the issues with regard to watershed, want to address the issues with regard to that big training facility that's being built over there right in front of the forest called Cop City. And so we are intentional in pushing back, because we know that specifically with Cop City, we're going to see, one, the destruction of the forest that's there, but two, training to disproportionately target African Americans and people of color by militarizing the police. So when people ask the question, what's the NAACP doing in this area, we are supporting the activists that are on the ground. We are making sure we speak truth to power, both in DeKalb and Atlanta, and we are pushing on the federal, state, and local level to make sure they are intentional in protecting minority communities from the disproportionate impact of issues in the environment that cause the inability to have a productive life. So we are on the front lines of those issues and supporting the institutions that have been doing this work for years.
What are some things that we can do to address this housing crisis, especially the renter crisis and the developers buying up different properties and controlling the market? What are your all thoughts on that?
Well, this is something that's very close and near and dear to me, not just in DeKalb County, but in the entire metro. There has to be a concerted conversation with the commissioners about zoning and allowing these investors to come in and build these projects that are not affordable to regular workforce development individuals and people with regular jobs. And so we've had this problem in the city of Atlanta, we've had this problem in Fulton, of course there's a problem in DeKalb County and all over the metro area. We have to have a real conversation about what affordability looks like, because when you have 30% of out-of-state investors that control both the housing stock and the rental stock, jacking up these prices. I mean, hearing that, housing affordability is supposed to be $1,100 for rent. I don't know anybody that's paying $1,100 for rent. I know I'm not paying $1,100 for rent, and I own my own home and another piece of property. So what I think we have to do is be intentional with our elected officials who are allowing the development to occur. Yes, we want to revitalize communities, but we don't want to push out the legacy residents that are living there. So when I see when I see large-scale redevelopment, and let's be clear, the large-scale redevelopment is happening in communities where people are aging, they may not be able to afford to keep up the property taxes on the house, and so they go and they sell mama's house, they sell grandmama's house, and then next thing you know, the people that live in grandmama's old neighborhood don't look like the people that used to live there. And there's not a building of actual affordable housing and rental stock for those people to stay there. I mean, people want to stay, and they want a nicer South Dekalb. They want a nicer Lithonia. They want a nicer Stonecrest. But they also want to make sure that they get to inherit the niceness. You know, I was looking just the other day. They just demolished North Dekalb Mall. Okay, what's going there? I think it's called Lula Hills, right? I don't think that the people who used to live around there are going to be able to afford Lula Hills. Because what, they're going to say, oh, they're going to have maybe 500 units that are below AMI, which is annual medium income. What is that? 30% under that is $2,000 rent for a 900 square foot living space. We got to put numbers to this stuff. So when you say $2,000 for 900 square feet or 700 square feet, y'all, that's half a bedroom, a kitchen, and a little bit of living space.
About 3 of these carpets.
Yeah, 3 of the carpets for 2 to 3 people to live in. You can't live there. And so I think we got to have that real conversation with our elected officials. Look, push back on the developers a little bit. You know, I know they're funding campaigns. But let's be clear. Campaign contribution does not turn into votes. Engaging with the people to what the people want will get votes, and those votes will not be bought by television ads. So let me say this. As somebody who spends a lot of time on North McDonough Boulevard or Commerce Drive, we have to take this same energy over there to the Maloof building. And every month, am I correct? Every month they have, twice a month, I'm sorry, county commission meeting. And if we had this many people at the county commission meeting, I promise you a lot of those statistics that we saw would change. The problem that we have is we vote and then that's the end. We got to be more intentional, not just to vote, but to hold our elected officials accountable. Because he's right. The biggest medical facility in DeKalb County is the jail. Now, Georgia Regional is actually, what, 2 streets over. That's the only mental health facility in the entire state. It's the mental health hospital. And so when you start looking at being intentional about where we're putting our public dollars, our elected officials aren't putting our public dollars where the people want it to be. So we got to go have a conversation with them twice a month to remind them, you can get all the political donations from the big PACs and from the corporations, but that doesn't move votes. What moves votes is pouring back into your community, and they need to hear from their community. I never forget this. I was talking to a state legislator, and they said, if I get 3 emails, it's a crisis. 3. Y'all, I get more than 3 emails. So what we have to do is be intentional and more politically aware that it's not just about voting. It's about holding our elected officials accountable, because every problem we have just lifted up is either a state or local electable problem. It's about legislation. It's about pushing policy that addresses these issues. So I think after we get done, I appreciate the pastor for opening the doors. More churches need to open these doors. And Pastor May, former Commissioner May, is correct. Pastors weren't equipped to actually be civic engagers. They need to get in touch with the civic engagers so we can mobilize, and then we can make sure after we strategize, we implement the policy positions that we want. I'll give you one example. We say that Georgia has a healthcare problem, right? So let me tell you what the NAACP did. We entered a memorandum of understanding with Healthcare of Georgia to provide mobile health units to the entire state. We can fix our own problems, then have a conversation with our elected officials to say, okay, y'all have this unlimited tax budget. We don't have this tax budget, but we're fixing the problem. And so I think that's what we have to do. We have to go to the places where they're convened. Public comment. Listen, I heard this great plan that y'all had 10 years ago, but Candler Road still looks the same. This great plan for reinvestment for South DeKalb County. You know, I was raised in South DeKalb County. 40 years ago, it looked the same as it looks right now. Glenwood looks the exact same. And so what we have to do as the largest voting bloc in DeKalb County, which is South DeKalb, is to demand the investment in South DeKalb as it looks in North DeKalb. And so I think that's clear. I'll close with this. I know a lot of the people that are in this room. I know there's some activists in this room, some of them with very large platforms. It's time to call the black folks into the conversation and to mobilize to not ask, not request, but to demand the change that we need. Because again, certain other parts of the county do not look like this. It's intentional. Push back on the developers and say, if you're going to come into this community and redevelop what the citizens want and make it affordable for the citizens.